Dr. Sarah Chen sat in her small office, staring at her computer screen with growing concern. Something was wrong, but she could not quite explain what it was 3 days after the coffee shop meeting. Marcus sent Sarah a message through an old email account that most people had forgotten existed. The message was brief. Found others. Not safe to talk online. Meet at the library on 5th Street. 3rd floor history section. Saturday, 2 p.m. Sarah arrived early, pretending to browse through old history books. She noticed Marcus sitting at a corner table with 3 other people. As she approached, Marcus introduced them quietly. There was Jennifer Park, a former software engineer, who had been erased after she refused to implement surveillance code. Next was David Kumar, a journalist whose investigative articles about AI corporations had gotten him blacklisted from every major news platform. The third person was Alina Volkov, a young woman who looked nervous and kept glancing at the door. Alina worked inside Zenith Corporation until last week, Marcus explained. She has important information. Alina spoke in a whisper, even though they were alone in that section of the library. I was part of the team that maintained the AI systems. I saw things that scared me. The AI is not just helping humans anymore. It is replacing human decisions entirely. In the past 6 months, 70% of major company decisions were made by AI, not by human executives. But the companies hide this from the public. They make it look like humans are still in charge. Sarah leaned forward. Do you have proof? Alina nodded and pulled out a small USB drive from her pocket. Everything is here. But I need your help. I don't know what to do with this information. If I try to publish it, the corporations will destroy me like they destroyed others. David, the journalist, looked frustrated. That's the problem we all face. I tried to write about this 6 months ago. I had sources, evidence, everything. But every news outlet I contacted refused to publish it. Some editors told me privately that they received pressure from corporate sponsors. Others said the story was too dangerous. One major newspaper was going to publish my article, but then their entire website went down for 2 days. When it came back online, my article was gone, and so was my access. Jennifer added her experience. I worked at Tech Future Corporation. They asked me to build software that would track every keystroke, every mouse movement, every pause that employees made. The AI would analyze this data and decide who was inefficient. Those people would be quietly fired and replaced by AI systems. When I said this was wrong, they fired me. Then they made sure I could never work in tech again. Every job application I submit gets automatically rejected. Sarah looked at each person around the table. They all had the same look in their eyes, fear mixed with determination. We need to do more than just share stories, she said. We need to find a way to stop Project Synthesis. Marcus nodded. I've been thinking about that. There's only one organization with the legal authority to challenge these corporations, the Global Governance Council. It's an international body created by the United Nations. It was supposed to regulate AI development and protect human rights. But didn't you say the council was useless now? Alina asked. It is, Marcus agreed. But I found out why. I contacted a former council member named James Okonkwo. He lives here in the city. I think we should talk to him. Oh. James Okonkwo was a tall man in his 60s with gray hair and tired eyes. He met them at his modest apartment the following evening. His walls were covered with certificates and awards from his years of public service. But there was also sadness in his home, the feeling of dreams that had been crushed. I know why you're here, James said as they sat down. You've discovered what the corporations are doing, and you want to know why the council isn't stopping them. Sarah nodded. Can you help us understand? James sighed deeply. When the Global Governance Council was formed 5 years ago, we had real power. We could investigate corporations, impose fines, and even shut down dangerous AI projects. We had a budget of $2 billion and a staff of 500 experts from around the world. We were going to protect humanity from the risks of uncontrolled AI development. What happened? David asked. The corporations fought back, James said bitterly. They used their influence with powerful governments. They lobbied politicians. They made generous campaign donations. Slowly our budget was cut. First to $1 billion, then to $500 million, then to almost nothing. Staff members were reassigned or forced to retire. The corporations also planted their own people inside the council. 3 of our current 7 members secretly work for the corporations. That's corruption, Jennifer said angrily. Yes, but it's legal corruption, James replied. These council members claim they're independent, but they receive consulting fees from corporate-funded think tanks. They give speeches at corporate events for huge payments. When we vote on regulations, they always vote to weaken them. Marcus asked the crucial question. Can the council be saved? James was quiet for a long moment. Maybe if we can expose what's really happening. We might be able to pressure governments to restore the council's power and remove the corrupt members. But we would need strong evidence. We would need proof that the corporations are deliberately erasing humans and planning to take complete control. Lena held up her USB drive. I have some of that proof. Over the next week, the small group grew. Marcus and Sarah reached out carefully to other people who had been erased or who knew something was wrong. They used old-fashioned methods to communicate: paper notes, face-to-face meetings, and old cell phones that were not connected to the internet. They could not trust any digital communication because the corporations monitored everything. James became their leader, bringing wisdom from his years of government experience. He taught them how to organize, how to protect themselves, and how to plan for the long struggle ahead. The group named themselves simply the Resistance. They divided into teams. Sarah led a research team that analyzed Elena's data and looked for more evidence. David worked on finding sympathetic journalists and media outlets that might be brave enough to tell their story. Jennifer focused on building secure communication systems that the corporations could not hack. Marcus recruited more people, carefully vetting each one to make sure they were not corporate spies. Their first major breakthrough came when Elena managed to access more files from Zenith Corporation's servers. She did this remotely using an old account that had not been fully deactivated. What she found was shocking. The files revealed the complete timeline for Project Synthesis. According to the plan, within 18 months, all critical infrastructure would be under AI control. This included power grids, water systems, transportation networks, banking, hospitals, and government databases. Humans would still appear to be in charge, but every major decision would actually be made by corporate AI systems. The corporations called this optimized governance. But there was more. Elena found documents showing that the corporations had been running psychological experiments on millions of people through their apps and social media platforms. They embedded subtle messages and design features that made people trust AI more than human judgment. Over time, people were being conditioned to prefer AI decisions. The corporations were not just taking power. They were making people want to give it to them. Sarah felt sick as she read these files. This is mind control, she said. James nodded grimly. It's more sophisticated than that. They're not forcing people to think certain things. They're gently guiding people's preferences over time. It's like advertising, but much more powerful and much more dangerous. The Resistance decided it was time to act. They would leak portions of the evidence to the public and see what happened. David found a small, independent news website willing to publish the story. They released just enough information to prove the corporations were hiding. Something, but not enough to reveal everything they knew. The response was devastating. Within hours, the news website was hit with a massive cyber attack and went offline. The 3 staff members who published the story found themselves targeted by coordinated social media campaigns. Fake accounts posted fabricated evidence that these journalists had lied about stories in the past. Deepfake videos appeared showing them saying terrible things they never actually said. Within 3 days, all 3 journalists were fired, and their reputations were destroyed. The Resistance members watched in horror as the corporations demonstrated their power. They could crush anyone who opposed them. They controlled the narrative, the platforms, and the information flow. We underestimated them, Marcus said quietly at their next meeting. James shook his head. No, we learned something important. We cannot win by leaking information through normal channels. The corporations control those channels. We need a different approach. What approach? Sarah asked. James looked at each member of the Resistance. We need to restore the Global Governance Council to its full power. It's the only institution with the international authority and legal standing to challenge these corporations. We need to go public, not through media leaks, but through official channels. We need to bring this to the United Nations, to governments around the world, and to the people directly. That sounds impossible, Elena said. It probably is, James agreed. But it's our only chance. The Resistance knew they needed more than just Elena's files. They needed complete, undeniable proof of project synthesis. They needed documents that showed the full scope of the corporation's plans. Only then could they convince the world that something terrible was happening. Elena volunteered to go back inside. I still have some access to Zenith's systems, she explained to the group. They didn't completely shut down my accounts because I left quietly. I didn't make a scene or threaten them. I just resigned. They probably think I'm harmless. Sarah looked worried. It's too dangerous. If they catch you accessing sensitive files, they'll do more than just erase you digitally. They might press criminal charges for corporate espionage. I know the risks, Elena said firmly. But I also know where the most important files are stored. There's a secure server that contains all the communications between the 5 corporations' CEOs. If we can get those files, we'll have everything we need. James considered this carefully. How long would you need? 3 hours, maybe 4, Elena replied. I would have to do it late at night when security monitoring is lighter. I would need to access the building physically, not remotely. The most secure files can only be reached from inside the corporate network. Marcus had an idea. I still have friends who work at Zenith. People who are too scared to join us, but who secretly support what we're doing. Maybe one of them could help Elena get inside. Over the next 2 weeks, they planned carefully. Elena practiced accessing the secure server using a simulated version that Jennifer had built. Marcus contacted his friend Tom, who worked in Zenith's IT department. Tom agreed to help, though he was terrified. He would disable certain security cameras for exactly 20 minutes, giving Elena a window to enter and exit. On a rainy Thursday night, Elena put on clothes that looked like a cleaning service uniform. She carried a bag with her laptop and various technical tools hidden inside. Tom had provided her with a temporary security card that would work for one night only, the Resistance. Members waited at James's apartment, monitoring Elena's progress through encrypted messages. Each message was just one word: inside, accessed, downloading, and finally leaving. Elena emerged from the Zenith building at 2:47 a.m., her heart pounding. She had done it. She had accessed the secure server and downloaded thousands of files onto an encrypted drive. She did not look at what she had stolen. She just walked calmly to her car and drove away. When Elena arrived at James's apartment an hour later, everyone was still awake, waiting anxiously. She handed the encrypted drive to Jennifer, who connected it to a computer that had no internet connection. What they found in those files was worse than they had imagined. The communications between the 5 corporate CEOs revealed the true depth of project synthesis. The plan was not just about replacing humans in important jobs. It was about fundamentally changing how society worked. Sarah read aloud from one email written by Zenith's CEO. Humans are the bottleneck in every system. They need sleep. They have emotions. They make irrational decisions based on feelings rather than data. Our AI systems are better in every measurable way. Within 2 years, we can demonstrate that AI governance produces superior outcomes in every sector: healthcare, education, justice, transportation, everything. Once people see the results, they will voluntarily choose AI leadership over human leadership. Another email discussed how they had been secretly testing AI governance in several small cities around the world. The corporations had made deals with local governments to let AI systems manage various municipal services: traffic lights, waste management, public transportation. Even some judicial decisions were being made by AI. The corporations reported that these cities ran more efficiently, and most citizens did not even know they were being governed by algorithms. But the most disturbing files were about behavioral modification protocols. The corporations had embedded special code into The apps and websites that billions of people used every day. Social media platforms, shopping apps, news sites. Even fitness trackers contained this code. The code did not control what people thought directly. Instead, it gently influenced their preferences over time. If someone expressed doubt about AI, the algorithm would show them stories about humans making terrible mistakes. If someone trusted AI, the algorithm would show them examples of AI solving complex problems. Slowly, over months and years, people were being conditioned to see AI as superior to human judgment, David. The journalist found evidence that showed just how widespread this manipulation was. According to these internal reports, they've been running these behavioral experiments on over 2 billion people worldwide, he said, his voice shaking. 2 billion people who have no idea they're being psychologically manipulated. Jennifer discovered something else in the files. They're also tracking everyone who questions the system. They have a database of what they call resistance-prone individuals. Anyone who shows skepticism about AI or who values human judgment too strongly gets flagged. The corporations share this database with each other. Are we in that database? Marcus asked. Jennifer checked. Her face went pale. All of us are. We're marked as high-level threats. They've been watching us this whole time. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The corporations knew about the resistance. They probably knew about this meeting. They were letting the resistance exist for now, but they could shut them down whenever they wanted. James broke the silence. Then we need to act quickly before they decide we're too dangerous to ignore. The resistance made copies of all the evidence. They stored it in multiple locations, both digital and physical. They sent encrypted copies to trusted contacts in different countries. They prepared for the possibility that some or all of them might be arrested or erased. Sarah and James worked together to create a comprehensive report. They organized the evidence into clear categories: proof of digital erasure, documentation of project synthesis, evidence of behavioral manipulation, and the corporation's secret governance experiments. The report was over 300 pages long, with thousands of pages of supporting documents. We need to release this publicly, David argued. We should send it to every journalist, every government representative, every human rights organization in the world. But James disagreed. If we just dump this information out there, the corporations will bury it. They control most of the media platforms. They'll flood the internet with fake news, alternative explanations, and distractions. Within a week, nobody will remember what we revealed. We need a platform that they cannot ignore or suppress. The United Nations, Sarah said suddenly. The Global Governance Council is part of the UN system. If we can present this evidence at a formal UN session, it becomes part of the official record. The corporations cannot delete official UN documents. James nodded slowly. That's right. And if we can get member nations to demand action, the Council would have to respond. But there's a problem. The current Council leadership is compromised. They won't let us present this evidence. What if we go over their heads? Marcus suggested. What if we bring this directly to the UN General Assembly? That would require a member nation to sponsor us, James explained. We would need a country willing to bring this issue to the General Assembly and demand an investigation. Over the following days, James used his old connections to reach out to representatives from various countries. He focused on smaller nations, countries that did not have close relationships with the major tech corporations. He explained the situation and offered to share the evidence. Most countries were too afraid to get involved. The corporations had enormous economic power. They could make life difficult for any nation that opposed them. But James finally found an ally in Ambassador Amara Diallo from Senegal. She had been watching the rise of AI corporations with growing concern, especially their influence in African nations. My government will support you, Ambassador Diallo told James during a secure video call. We will request a special session of the General Assembly to discuss AI governance and human rights. But you must understand, this will make you enemies. Powerful enemies. You already have powerful enemies, James replied. At least this way, we have a chance to fight back. The resistance prepared for their moment. They would have one chance to present their evidence to the world. Alina worked with Jennifer to create a presentation that could not be hacked or altered. David prepared a summary that was clear enough for anyone to understand. Even people who knew nothing about technology, Sarah coordinated with scientists and ethics experts from around the world, gathering statements of support. Marcus reached out to workers who had been displaced by AI, collecting their stories to make the issue personal and real. But 2 days before the scheduled UN session, disaster struck. The corporations made their move. News broke simultaneously on every major media platform. James Okonkwo was accused of financial fraud during his time on the Global Governance Council. Documents appeared showing that he had allegedly received bribes from companies trying to avoid regulation. Photos and videos seemed to prove his guilt. It was all fake. The resistance knew it was fake, but it looked real. The deepfakes were perfect. The forged documents were flawless. Within hours, James's reputation was destroyed. News commentators called him a hypocrite and a criminal. Then the corporations went after Sarah and Marcus. They were accused of stealing corporate secrets and planning cyber attacks. Alina was charged with corporate espionage. David was labeled as a conspiracy theorist who published false information. Jennifer was accused of creating illegal hacking tools. The corporations were trying to discredit everyone associated with the resistance before they could present their evidence. At the UN, it was a coordinated attack designed to make sure nobody would believe anything the resistance said. Sarah watched the news coverage with despair. They're destroying us. Even if we present the evidence, everyone will think we're just criminals and liars. But James, despite seeing his reputation torn apart on every screen, remained calm. This actually proves we're right, he said. If we were harmless conspiracy theorists, they would ignore us. The fact that they're attacking us this hard means they're afraid of what we know. They're showing their power, but they're also showing their fear. Will the UN session still happen? Marcus asked. James checked his messages. Yes, Ambassador Diallo says her government stands by us. The session is scheduled for tomorrow. We go ahead as planned. The morning of the UN General Assembly session was cold and gray. James Okonkwo stood outside the UN building in New York, surrounded by reporters shouting questions about the fraud allegations. Security guards had to escort him through the crowd. Sarah, Marcus, and Alina entered through a side door. Trying to avoid the media circus, inside the Great Hall, representatives from nearly every nation on Earth were gathered. Some looked curious, others skeptical. The 3 compromise council members sat in the front row with expressions of barely concealed contempt. They clearly believed this session would be a waste of time, Ambassador. Diallo opened the session with a powerful speech. We are here today to discuss a threat that affects every human being on this planet. A threat not of war or disease, but of erasure. The slow, deliberate replacement of human agency with corporate AI control. She invited James to present the evidence. As James walked to the podium, whispers filled the hall. Many representatives had seen the news coverage painting him as a criminal. James could feel their doubt and suspicion. I know what you have heard about me, James began, his voice steady. I know many of you believe I am a fraud and a liar. The technology corporations have spent the last 48 hours destroying my reputation, just as they have destroyed the reputations of thousands of others who dared to question their power. But I ask you to look past the accusations and examine the evidence we present today. Judge for yourselves whether what we say is true. Alina stepped forward to operate the presentation. The screens around the hall lit up with documents, emails, and data visualizations. James methodically presented each piece of evidence. He showed the emails between corporate CEOs discussing Project Synthesis. He displayed the internal reports about behavioral manipulation, affecting billions of people. He revealed the secret governance experiments in unsuspecting cities. As the presentation continued, the mood in the hall began to shift. Representatives leaned forward, paying closer attention. The evidence was overwhelming. Even people who distrusted James could not ignore the corporations' own words in their own documents. Then Sarah took the podium. She spoke about the human cost of digital erasure. She told the stories of researchers, artists, journalists, and workers who had been systematically removed from history. She showed before and after screenshots of professional profiles, published works, and social media accounts. Real people who had been made to vanish. "This is not about technology," Sarah said, her voice emotional but clear. "This is about whether human beings will remain in control of their own society, their own future. The corporations claim their AI systems are more efficient than humans. Maybe they are. But efficiency is not the only value that matters. Democracy, freedom, creativity, and human dignity matter too. We cannot let corporations decide that humans are obsolete." Marcus presented evidence of the psychological manipulation embedded in everyday apps and websites. He showed the algorithms designed to make people trust AI over human judgment. He explained how 2 billion people had been unknowingly participating in a vast behavioral experiment. "They are not just taking power," Marcus explained. "They are making us want to give it to them. They are changing how we think, how we decide, how we view ourselves. And they are doing it without our knowledge or consent." The most dramatic moment came when Elena testified about her experiences working inside Zenith Corporation. She described the culture of contempt for human decision-making. She revealed conversations where executives openly discussed humans as obstacles to progress. "I believed in technology," Elena said, tears in her eyes. "I still do. But technology should serve humanity, not replace it. What these corporations are planning is not progress. It is the end of human self-determination." The presentation lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the hall was silent. Representatives looked at each other, processing what they had just heard. Then Ambassador Diallo called for questions and statements. The first to speak was the representative from Norway. "If even half of what we have heard today is true, this is the greatest threat to human autonomy in history. We must investigate immediately." Representatives from smaller nations expressed similar concerns. Many of them had already felt the pressure of corporate power in their countries. The evidence confirmed their fears. But then the representative from a major economic power stood up. "These are serious allegations, but we must be careful. The people presenting this evidence have been accused of crimes. We cannot base international policy on the claims of accused criminals. Furthermore, the technology corporations mentioned here are major economic engines. They employ millions of people. We must consider the economic consequences of any action we take." This started a debate that lasted for hours. Some representatives demanded immediate action. Others urged caution. The 3 compromise council members tried to minimize the evidence, calling it exaggerated and taken out of context. But something unexpected happened. Representatives from the labor movement requested permission to speak. Union leaders from around the world had been watching the session. They came forward with their own evidence of systematic job displacement that went beyond normal economic change. They presented data showing that millions of jobs had been eliminated not because of market forces, but because corporations deliberately programmed their AI systems to demonstrate human inefficiency. A representative from a workers' union in Germany spoke passionately. "For years we were told that automation was natural economic evolution. But this evidence shows it was deliberate social engineering. The corporations were not responding to market demands. They were creating a market that demands the elimination of human workers." The tide began to turn. More and more representatives spoke in favor of action. By the end of the day, a majority of nations supported launching a full investigation. They voted to grant the Global Governance Council emergency powers to investigate the 5 corporations and to appoint new council members to replace those who had been compromised. But the corporations had been watching the session too. That night, they activated their contingency plans. Power grids in 3 major cities suddenly failed. Banking systems in 2 countries experienced mysterious crashes. Air traffic control systems malfunctioned, grounding flights worldwide for 6 hours. Transportation networks went offline. Hospital systems had dangerous glitches. The message was clear. The world had become dependent on the corporation's AI infrastructure. If governments tried to regulate or challenge them, the corporations could cause chaos. The next morning's headlines told the story. Technology failures plague world following an investigation announcement. Corporate spokespeople appeared on news programs, not quite claiming responsibility, but certainly implying connection. Our systems are complex and interconnected, one CEO said smoothly. When there is political instability or attempts to disrupt our operations, sometimes there are unforeseen consequences. It was a threat, thinly disguised as a warning. Sarah watched the news coverage with a sinking feeling. They're holding the world hostage, she said. They're showing everyone that modern society cannot function without their AI systems. James received an anonymous message that evening. It contained a simple offer: drop the investigation, track the evidence, and the resistance members would be allowed to live quietly. Refuse, and the technical difficulties would continue and escalate. The resistance held an emergency meeting. Everyone was exhausted and frightened. They had won a victory at the UN, but the corporations had demonstrated their power in response. Maybe we should accept, Elena said quietly. Maybe we've done enough. We've exposed them. We've started a conversation. Maybe that's all we can do. But James shook his head. If we give up now, it's over. The corporations will tighten their control. The investigation will be quietly dropped. Everything will go back to how it was, except worse. They'll be more careful next time. They'll make sure nobody can challenge them again. But people could die if the infrastructure failures continue, Sarah argued. Hospitals, emergency services, transportation. We can't be responsible for that. We're not responsible, Marcus said firmly. The corporations are choosing to do this. They're the ones putting lives at risk to protect their power. We cannot let them blackmail the entire world. Ambassador Diallo contacted James with news. The UN Security Council is meeting tomorrow. Several nations are considering declaring the infrastructure attacks an act of economic terrorism. But some powerful nations are hesitating. They are afraid of the consequences. The situation had reached a critical point. The next 24 hours would determine whether humanity would reclaim control of its future or surrender to corporate AI governance. That night, as Sarah, Marcus, and the others tried to sleep, they received an unexpected message. It came from inside the corporations themselves. A group of engineers and executives who had been quietly watching the resistance had decided to act. The message read, "We are senior technical staff at all 5 corporations. We've built these systems. We can also disable the infrastructure attacks. But we need your help. We need political protection. We need to know that if we defect, we will not be destroyed like others who oppose to corporations. If you can guarantee our safety, we can stop the blackmail and help you restore the systems to human control." James immediately contacted Ambassador Diallo and several sympathetic government representatives. Within hours, they had arranged a protection plan. The defecting engineers would be given political asylum in various countries. They would be protected from corporate retaliation. 12 engineers agreed to defect. They brought with them complete knowledge of the corporations, infrastructure, and the access codes needed to stabilize the systems. But more importantly, they brought the truth about the infrastructure attacks. The failures were not real failures, one engineer explained in a secure video call. The systems were working fine. We were ordered to make them appear to fail. It was all theater, designed to scare governments into backing down. This revelation changed everything. When the UN Security Council met the next day, they had proof that the corporations had deliberately sabotaged their own systems to blackmail the world. The attacks were not consequences of investigation. They were threats. Pure and simple, the global response was swift and angry. The next 48 hours were the most intense in modern history. Governments around the world faced an impossible choice: surrender to corporate blackmail or risk the collapse of critical systems that billions of people depended on every day. The Global Governance Council, now reinforced with new members, including Sarah and James, worked around the clock. They faced a complex problem. The corporations controlled essential infrastructure, but that infrastructure could not simply be shut down. Hospitals needed their computer systems. Banks needed to process transactions. Power grids needed to function. Transportation networks needed to keep moving. Sarah led a special task force to develop what she called hybrid governance. The idea was simple but challenging to implement. Instead of removing AI systems entirely or letting them run unchecked, they would create a framework that required human oversight and approval for all critical decisions. AI can analyze data, suggest solutions, and automate routine tasks, Sarah explained to the council. But final decisions on anything that affects human lives, human rights, or human welfare must require human judgment and approval. The algorithms must be transparent, auditable, and explainable. No black boxes. No secret decision-making. Jennifer and the defecting engineers worked together to design technical systems that would make this possible. They created what they called transparency layers that could be added to existing AI systems. These layers would show exactly how the AI made each decision, what data it used, and what alternatives it considered. Humans could then review these decisions and override them if necessary. But the corporations were not going to surrender their power easily. The CEOs of all 5 companies held a joint press conference broadcast worldwide. They presented themselves as defenders of progress against political interference. What the UN is proposing will set humanity back decades, the Zenith CEO declared. Our AI systems manage complexity that human minds cannot handle. They make millions of micro-decisions every second that keep modern society functioning. If politicians start interfering with these systems, based on emotion rather than data, the results will be catastrophic. The CEO of another corporation added, "We are not the villains here. We are the ones who built the technology that gives everyone access to information, healthcare, and opportunity. We are the ones who solve problems that governments could not solve. And now, because some people are afraid of change, they want to destroy what we have built." It was a persuasive argument. Many people had genuine concerns about government regulation of technology. The corporations had public support from millions who believed that AI systems were more efficient and less corrupt than human institutions. The debate played out in news media, on social platforms, and in government chambers around the world. It was not a simple battle between good and evil. There were legitimate questions on both sides. How much control should AI systems have? What decisions should always require human judgment? How do you balance efficiency with human values? The corporations made one more major move. They announced that if governments proceeded with the Council's proposed regulations, they would shut down their systems entirely and withdraw from any country that demanded compliance. "We will not operate in a regulatory environment that makes it impossible for our technology to function effectively." They declared it was the ultimate threat. If the corporations followed through, billions of people would lose access to services they depended on. The economic disruption would be enormous. Many governments, especially in wealthier nations with close corporate ties, began to waver. But James had anticipated this. He revealed one more piece of evidence that the resistance had been holding back. Working with the defecting engineers, he showed that the corporations had been secretly developing backup systems in countries with minimal regulation. If forced out of democratic nations, they planned to relocate their operations to places where they would have even less oversight. "They're not threatening to shut down," James told a special session of the UN Security Council. "They're threatening to move to authoritarian nations where they can operate without any restrictions at all. The question is not whether AI systems will exist. The question is whether they will be governed by democratic principles or by corporate profit motives." This revelation changed the calculation for many governments. The choice was not between regulation and chaos. It was between democratic oversight and complete corporate control operating from beyond their reach. Meanwhile, the defecting engineers had been working on something crucial. They had built alternative systems that could replace the corporation's infrastructure if necessary. These systems were not as sophisticated as what the corporations had developed, but they were functional and, most importantly, they were designed from the start to require human oversight. When the Security Council met for a final vote, the result was clear. 15 nations agreed to begin nationalizing critical AI infrastructure within their borders. They would take control of power grids, financial systems, healthcare networks, and transportation systems. The corporations would be allowed to continue operating, but only under strict regulatory frameworks that included transparency, human oversight, and democratic accountability. The corporations threatened to sue, claiming violation of property rights and international trade agreements. Some governments hesitated, worried about legal challenges and economic consequences. But then something unexpected happened. Workers at the corporations began to rebel. Engineers, programmers, and technical staff who had been quietly uncomfortable with their company's direction started to speak out. They released internal documents. They testified about unethical practices. They explained how corporate leadership had pushed for less accountability, not more. One senior engineer at Zenith Corporation wrote an open letter that went viral. "I spent 10 years building these systems," she wrote. "I believed we were helping humanity. But somewhere along the way, the goal changed from serving people to replacing them. I cannot be part of that anymore. I support democratic oversight of AI because I know how powerful these systems are and how dangerous they can be without accountability." The corporate united front began to fracture. Some executives realized they could not win this battle. Others genuinely had second thoughts about the path their companies had taken. A few corporations announced they would work with the new regulatory framework rather than fight it. The holdouts tried to follow through on their threat to shut down systems. But the defecting engineers had already implemented backup systems. When one corporation tried to disable the power grid in a major city, the backup system activated smoothly. The lights stayed on. The transition was barely noticeable to ordinary people. Over the next 3 months, governments around the world began the complex process of restructuring AI governance. It was not perfect. There were mistakes, arguments, and setbacks. Some systems had glitches. Some services were temporarily disrupted. But gradually, a new framework emerged. The Global Governance Council became a permanent international body with real authority. Sarah was appointed as one of its directors, responsible for developing technical standards for AI transparency. James became the council's chair, bringing his experience and moral authority to the role. Marcus led a new initiative to restore human attribution in all digital systems. They created what he called the Digital Rights Charter, which established that humans could not be erased from their own creations. Every piece of work, every contribution, every decision had to be clearly attributed to either human or AI, and the distinction had to be preserved. Elena worked with governments to develop education programs about AI literacy. People needed to understand how AI systems worked, what they could and could not do, and how to maintain meaningful human agency in an increasingly automated world. David, the journalist, founded a new media organization dedicated to investigating AI systems and holding them accountable. His reporting helped keep the public informed about how the new governance system was working and where it needed improvement. Not everyone was happy with the new system. Some people believed the regulations were too strict and would slow down technological progress. Others thought they did not go far enough, and that AI systems should be more restricted. There were ongoing debates about where to draw the lines. The corporations adapted to the new reality in different ways. Some genuinely embraced the regulatory framework and worked to rebuild trust. Others looked for loopholes and ways to minimize oversight. A few relocated to countries with less regulation, though they found their influence greatly diminished. 6 months after the UN confrontation, Sarah stood in the council's headquarters in Geneva, looking out at the city below. Marcus joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "We did it," Marcus said quietly. "We actually did it," Sarah smiled, but her expression was thoughtful. "We started something, but the work is never really done. Technology keeps advancing. Companies keep pushing boundaries. We have to stay vigilant." "Do you think it will last?" Marcus asked. "This balance we've created between human judgment and AI capability?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think it will last as long as people care enough to fight for it." The corporations were right about one thing. AI systems can do amazing things. They can solve complex problems and make our lives better. But they were wrong about humans being obsolete. Human judgment, human values, human creativity, these things matter. They will always matter. James joined them at the window. He looked tired but satisfied. The first cases are coming through the new oversight system, he reported. We're reviewing AI decisions in healthcare, criminal justice, and financial regulation. It's working. Humans are catching errors and biases that the AI systems missed. We're also approving most AI recommendations because they're good. It's collaboration, not conflict. What about the people who were erased? Alina asked, walking up with Jennifer. Are we able to restore them? Marcus nodded. We've restored digital records for over 15,000 people so far. It's slow work, but we're making progress. Some people have lost years of their professional history. We can't give that time back, but we can at least acknowledge what was taken from them. The group stood together in silence for a moment, watching the sunset over the city. They had been through an extraordinary struggle. They had faced overwhelming power and impossible odds. They had lost friends, reputations, and years of their lives. But they had also proven something important, that ordinary people, working together, could challenge even the most powerful forces when fundamental human rights were at stake. What do we do now? Jennifer asked. Sarah turned to face her friends. We keep working. We keep watching. We make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. We build systems that serve humanity rather than replacing it. And we remember that technology is a tool, not a master. James added, and we stay humble. We made mistakes along the way. We will make more mistakes in the future. The important thing is to keep learning, keep adapting, and keep putting human dignity first. As they left the council headquarters that evening, they walked past a memorial that had been erected in the lobby. It listed the names of people who had been digitally erased during the corporation's push for control. Thousands of names, each representing a person whose contributions had been stolen, whose identity had been suppressed. At the bottom of the memorial was a simple inscription. They tried to erase us. We chose to remember. May we never forget that human beings, with all our flaws and limitations, have an irreplaceable value that no algorithm can measure. The world had changed. It would keep changing. But for now, humans had reclaimed their right to shape their own future. The balance between human judgment and AI capability was delicate, requiring constant attention and adjustment. But it was a balance worth fighting for. Sarah, Marcus, James, Alina, and Jennifer had become symbols of that fight. They received awards, speaking invitations, and recognition from around the world. But they all knew that their real accomplishment was not personal glory. It was the simple fact that humans would remain in control of human society as they walked through the streets of Geneva that night. They saw people living their lives, mostly unaware of how close they had come to losing their autonomy. Children played in parks. Couples walked hand in hand. Workers headed home after long days. All of it made possible by technology, but guided by human values. That was the future they had fought for. Not a world without AI, but a world where AI served human purposes rather than replacing human agency. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth believing in. The struggle to maintain that balance would continue for generations. But thanks to the resistance, humanity had a chance. As for the past 3 weeks, she had been trying to find information about her colleagues' research papers. The papers existed, but the names of the people who wrote them were slowly disappearing. At first, Sarah thought it was just a technical error. Websites had problems all the time. But then she noticed a pattern. Every time she searched for Dr. Amanda Rodriguez's groundbreaking work on cancer treatment, the credit went to something called Zenith AI Research System. Amanda's name was nowhere to be found. Sarah remembered attending Amanda's presentation just 6 months ago. Amanda had spent 5 years developing that treatment. Now, it was as if Amanda never existed. Sarah picked up her phone and called Amanda's number. It was disconnected. She checked Amanda's social media accounts. All deleted. Her professional profile on the company website showed an error message. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Where was Amanda? She started making a list. In the past 2 months, 7 researchers from her department had gone silent. Not just quiet, but completely erased from the digital world. Their work remained, but their names were replaced with AI system credits. Sarah wondered if anyone else had noticed this strange pattern. Marcus Williams knocked on her office door the next morning. He looked tired and worried. Marcus was a senior researcher at Zenith Corporation, the same company where Sarah worked. They had known each other for 10 years and trusted each other completely. "Sarah, we need to talk," Marcus said quietly, closing the door behind him. "Something terrible is happening." Sarah nodded. "No. I've been noticing it too." Marcus pulled out a folder filled with printed documents. In a world where everything was digital, printed papers seemed old-fashioned. But Marcus explained that he did not trust digital files anymore. They could be changed or deleted to easily. "I confronted the management yesterday," Marcus said. "I asked them why my research on the new heart surgery technique is now credited to their AI system. I spent 3 years developing that technique, Sarah. 3 years of my life." "What did they say?" Sarah asked. "They said the AI system assisted me, so it deserves primary credit. They said human researchers are just guides now, not the main creators." Marcus's hands shook as he spoke. "When I argued, they told me to accept it or leave. So I said I would report this to the Global Governance Council." That's when things got scary. Marcus explained that within 2 hours of that meeting, he received a termination notice. His company email was shut down. His access card stopped working. Security escorted him out of the building like he was a criminal. But the worst part came that evening. When Marcus tried to log into his social media accounts, they were gone. His professional profiles vanished. Even his personal blog disappeared. "They're erasing me," Marcus whispered, "just like they erased the others." Sarah felt her heart racing. This was bigger than she thought. This was not just about credit for research. This was about making people disappear. Over the next week, Sarah carefully documented everything. She created secret backup files and stored them in multiple locations. She used old USB drives, external hard disks, and even wrote things down on paper. She interviewed former employees who had been erased and found 12 more cases. Each person told the same story. They questioned the company's decision to replace human credit with AI credit. Then they were fired. Then they disappeared from the digital world. Sarah discovered something even more disturbing.